with our piece that we are going to bind. This is a collage that I did a couple of years ago, actually, and never got around to finishing it. So this video was a good impetus for me to get it quilted, which I did yesterday, and that's why I'm still sort of picking at threads as I see them. But it is ready to be bound. So the first thing I had to do was determine what size my piece is. And I measured it, and I learned that my two short sides are 13 inches, and my two longer sides are each 18 inches. So when I add that together, I come up with 31 inches, and I have to multiply that times 2 because there's 2 of each of them, and that gives me 62 inches of outside edge. Now, because of the constructing of our binding that we're going to do, 72 inches will not be enough. So I like to add 10 inches, which is sort of the norm to add. That's going to be a little generous for a piece this size, but think 10. And that will give me plenty of fabric for my mitering of the corners. Mitering of putting my pieces, sewing my strips together, as well as the excess that I need when I am joining where I started with where I end with my binding. So that makes my grand total 72 inches. I cut my strips from a fat quarter, so we know that that fat quarter was 20 inches, and dividing my 72 by 20 gave me 3.6, I think it was, which we don't have points, so round it up to 4. So I need 4 strips for my binding. The average or the norm for binding is 2.5 inches. That's what a lot of people use, and that's what I used for a long time. I've gone down to 2.25 because I like a more narrow binding. It's entirely up to you. You might want to experiment to see the look you want, whether you want it wider or narrower, but I use 2.25. So I have them all cut, all 4 of them, and now I have to join them so that I will have one long piece. And I'm going to do that by mitering my corners, my strips, and I've laid a piece down right side up. I've put a piece on top at right angles, right side down, and I will seam from upper left-hand corner down to lower right-hand corner, and that is going to give me a nice continuation of this strip. And we do a miter as opposed to simply abutting them and having this kind of a situation. When we do, if we were to just abut it, see if I can sort of play with this to get it to do, all of that seam is going to be in one spot, whereas when we miter our corners, that seam is now dispersed along a broader space, which doesn't give us the entire seam in one spot. So that's the reason it's always recommended that you go ahead and miter your binding to seam them all together. So that's what I have. I will do that with this one, and then before, I won't cut my threads, get some of this out of the way. I will turn the one that was face down, that was right side down, without twisting it. I'm going to lay it face up, right side up, and take my next one and at a right angle seam, and this one is now right side down, seam, upper left to lower right, and continue that with all of my pieces. If that makes you nervous, do one, cut your threads, and do another. Thread is very inexpensive, so do what you will be comfortable with rather than fretting over, do I have it twisted wrong? Is this laying down correctly? So whatever works for you. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and make one long strip out of these 4 pieces. Once I have trimmed and opened up my seams, press them open, I am ready to fold my entire strip in half. And I want to be as accurate with that as I can be. And it takes a good little steaming to give me a nice crease there. I failed to mention another reason for checking it. One is that it's nice and straight and true, but also that you haven't inadvertently either started from the corner to the wrong corner or gotten one flipped around where it isn't all right side showing. Especially if you're using a grunge, it's sometimes difficult to know that you've turned it around the wrong way. So do take the time to check. So I'm going to continue pressing this in half, and then I will be back to show you how we structure our beginning end. Well, it wouldn't be me doing a video if I didn't make a mistake. I nearly always, if it isn't of such a large size that it's prohibitive, after I have everything seamed together, I do usually go ahead and do a pretend. So I start at one end and I go to the corner and pretend I'm folding it up like we do and come on down and continue with that little exercise. Well, I did this and I didn't have enough binding. I thought, what? So I double checked my measurements. Even I can multiply by 2. And the division was fairly basic. I thought, what has happened here? What has gone wrong? Well, I fiddled with it and fiddled with it. Finally got up and picked up the remaining fat quarter that I had and realized what I had done was not cut it on the width. I had cut it on the length. So I have added 1 strip, but am I ever glad I took the time to go around. So sometimes you don't know what you think you know. All right, so that's that little detour. Now what I'm going to do, I'm using this space for a little bit of everything so I don't have to keep moving that camera. I'm going to take one of my ends. It doesn't matter which end, that's just going to be, that will become the end that I start with. And I'm going to fold it down at a 45-degree angle. And actually I do need my pressing mat. So I folded it down at a 45-degree angle. There we are. And I'm going to press it. And once I have pressed it, I will trim that down to 1/4 inch approximately. And then refold it because I have pressed that fold out. So I'm going to refold it and trim that dog ear. Now, you can either sew it to the front side or the back side. It depends upon how you're going to want to finish it. Normally, you will seam it to the front side, turn it, and then do your hand stitching on the back. Hand stitching on something that isn't really all that critical to me is not something I do unless I have to. So I will be sewing mine to the back side, bringing it to the front, and I'm going to stitch it with my machine. So, but normally you would sew it to the front, turning it over and hand stitching it to the back. So I will turn my piece over, and I like to start on a short end, and I start somewhere down a little below middle. So you can sort of see where I'm putting it. This is my middle, but I'm going to start it on down here. So I have a tail that will not be secured. That's about 3.5 inches long. This is where I'm going to start seaming it to my project. So I have it on my machine, and I have my 1/4 inch foot on. So I will keep my foot along the edge and come on down. Now you notice I am not the Indianapolis 500 so I keep my machine right about midway of the speed, you know, slow but sure. I just can think better when it goes slower. So here I'm coming, and I can feel the edge. I can feel where I'm getting to the edge of my project, and I want to stop a 1/4 inch before that, and I have a marking on my foot that tells me where that 1/4 inch from the needle is. If you don't have it, you may want to mark your binding, but I think just about every foot does that. So I'm going to go a little slower, watching, and once I'm there, I'm going to back tack and cut my thread. Now what I need to do is pull this straight up. The tail of my binding is pulled straight up so that it is parallel with the edge of my project. If it is not, maybe I need one more stitch. Maybe I came one stitch too far. You will want to correct it if at all possible. So I am straight, and now what I'm going to do is bring this tail back and make it flush with my binding that I already have. It is flush with where my binding is secured. making certain that it is straight along here. Going to bring it back under my foot. I want that thread to be where it should be. And I want to start sewing in the same line that I've come up and a 1/4 inch from the edge. If you are uncertain, this would be the time to maybe mark where your seam has already gone and mark a 1/4 inch from this side. Take all the tools you need until you're sort of seeing it or feeling it. If you feel it with your nail, you can sort of feel where that fabric is under it. So I will bring my needle down and sew a couple stitches and back tack. And now continue on down. And I will do that all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and I will be back as we're getting to the end. Okay, I am coming up to our last corner, and I am keeping my my binder fabric taut, not pulling on it. I don't want to stretch it, but I am keeping it taut because there's a lot of thickness that we're trying to go through. So here I'm coming up to my last one more stitch and back tack. Turn it, and I am parallel with my project. Bring it down flush with the binding. Put my needle down. There we go. And couple stitches, back tack. One too many back tacks, but we'll see how we do. And come on down toward where I started, and I'm going to lay my tail up. Okay. Going to back tack and show you what I'm doing. So what I did, so here's the tail that I had. So I'm laying it down on the fabric, and my top piece I am going to trim off at about that angle. So you see what I'm doing? I'm coming just inside where this is folded under, and I am going to trim this top piece accordingly. And tuck that in. Okay, there. So I will continue my stitching, coming back to where I stopped, putting my needle down, And I don't know that you can see this. There. Holding everything nice and taut. Going to sew on down. Now what I have left is this little filler that I either cannot worry about, or what I like to do is take a little piece of this stitch witchery, and I don't need much. I just need maybe less than an inch, really generous ½ inch. And then that I'm going to cut in half so that I have one that I'm going to slip right under here, and I'm going to take it over to my iron and steam that, and I will take the other one and do that same thing on the other side. Okay, so what I have now is my binding all the way around, and I'm going to steam it really, really good, putting it in place, getting a good sharp seam all along the piece. As you can see, I have clipped, I've steamed my binding really, really well, and now I have brought it to the front. You will probably more often than not be taking yours to the back. I brought it to the front because I'm going to use my machine to finish it off. So I have it clipped in place. There are people that would just hang their head in shame if they knew that I had clipped it all the way around with these little clips. I feel better using all the aids I can get. So no shame there. There you are. That's what I'm doing. So I've extended my stitch length to 3.5 because if I were doing it by hand, it would be a longer stitch than what I am seaming with. So you do as you please. You can also do a zigzag. I'm doing a straight stitch only because my binding is so dark in comparison. I'm having to use black thread, or I felt it would be best if I did. And the zigzag is going to show on my white background. Normally, I do a zigzag because usually it doesn't matter that much. So here I go. I have my fabric just with my foot. It's just touching the left-hand side of that foot, that's portion of the foot that's to the left. So that's what I'm going to use for my guide. I will go very slowly. And remove as I go. I've clipped my corners in place. Well, maybe I should show, well, what you do is you lay one down flat and bring the other over, and your points should meet to where it forms a right angle. And now I'm going to want to make certain that before I turn it, I have at least one stitch on the uppermost fabric so that when I turn it, I can do this all here. I forget about all this fancy stuff. Then my hand doesn't get in the way of this vision, of your vision. Okay, so now I'm starting down this other side. And I will continue on around the entire piece. So I am finished, and I'd wondered about whether or not I had made a mistake in the fabric I chose for my border or for my binding, but I like it. It picks up all the flower colors and the whole 9 yards. So it is all finished. I do go along when I have stitched it on top with my finger to make certain that I didn't miss any spaces. It's easy to do sometimes, but that is it. So let me move this so you can see I'm still here, and there. So hope this was a help to you. It's an alternative, and as I say, it's the method I prefer. So anyway, thank you for watching. Happy sewing, and we'll see you the next time. Bye now.